Welcome back once again to my channel. This is Sports Series, where I've been covering sport policies and sport management issues across the globe. And as you know, I often like to um, talk about my publications and in a way that people can relate to it, especially when some of these academic publications appear very complex for many people to understand. And when you take the writing and then some words into considerations, or some terminologies. So today, what are we looking at? My recent publication with my co-authors from the Norwegian School of Sports Science, Loughborough University, and the University of Southeastern Norway. And here we look at sport and sustainable social development in Ghana, analyzing the policy implementation gap. So why this research? There is a global impetus, or what others call it, optimism for sports as a tool for development. And in the statement of the United Nations, when they endorsed the Sustainable Development Goals in 2016, by stating categorically that sports is an important enabler of sustainable development. And since then, the sports, as well as the SDGs, has appeared in many countries' policy documents, and Ghana is not an exception, where sport is linked to the social dimension of the Sustainable Development Goals. For those of you in Ghana, you would observe that sustainability has become a buzzword, where everyone from all walks of life, including organizations, from state and non-state corporations, from private sector, is using the word sustainability. And you cannot mention the Sustainable Development Goals without mentioning sports' role. So that's why in Ghana, sport is linked to the social dimension. And you can visit the website of the National Development Planning Commission, where it's also written clearly there the role of sports in the social dimension of the SDGs. By the social dimension, it meant that the social goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. And as you observe, the Sustainable Development Goals, which I will use the word SDGs as an acronym for it, has three dimensions, which is the social, the economic, and then the environmental goals. And all these three dimensions are interlinked and connected. I focus more on the social goals, and as you know, you cannot talk about the social goals without financial commitment and its impact on the environment. So primarily, we looked at the social goals, particularly focusing on health and then the well-being of the people of Ghana. And you would understand why we chose that. If you visit the medium-term expenditure framework of the Ministry of Youth and Sports, which can be found in the Ministry of Finance website, particularly under the budget section, you'll observe that since 2016, when the SDGs were passed by the United Nations, the Ministry of Youth and Sports, like any other ministry in Ghana, has consecutively mentioned sports' role in ensuring particularly healthy nation, healthy population of Ghana, and then also the well-being of the people in the community. And this relates to the SDGs Goal 3, that's the Sustainable Development Goal 3, which focuses on health. So in line with target 3.3 of the SDG 3, which is the health, the Sports Ministry has focused on sensitizing Ghanaian youth on reproductive health issues, particularly through a program called Repro Talk or Reproductive Talk. And the ministry has also focused more recently on the coronavirus disease, also through a program called the Community Information Dissemination for COVID-19, And then thirdly, also the ministry initiated, the youth and sports resource centers of excellence in the various communities in Ghana. And in the medium-term expenditure framework that I keep mentioning, if you look at from 2016 to 2021, you observe that about 8,355,609 Ghanaian youth have been involved in this program. So that shows how the sports ministry is using sports to, as I mentioned, enable or enhance the social development of communities in Ghana. So we want to look at the role of sport, particularly when people or almost everyone talk about sport as a powerful tool. Sports as a powerful tool that unites broken nations in the words of Mandela. Sports links people irrespective of their language in the words of Kofi Annan, the late Kofi Annan. And sports plays an important role in the society in which we live in. But you'd also agree with me that these acknowledgements, of the potential of sport in itself cannot be the decisive evidence of deep commitment or successful implementation. What this means is that sports in itself do not operate in isolation. There has to be some commitment. There has to be some context. That is government playing a role to ensure that sports achieve its intended outcome. So that's where we departed from with regards to this research. And here we analyze how sport partners, here what sports partners means is governmental and non-governmental organizations, how they've been involved and resourced in implementing the government's, or let's say the ministry, the sports ministry's commitment to the community and well-being policy as stated in its medium-term expenditure framework. So we adopted a qualitative data. The reason why we adopted a qualitative data is that you would observe that there have been two ways, and that's two quantitative ways of deriving data, which is one, the budgeting tracking system, which is an integrative software called Hyperion that gathers data related to the SDGs in Ghana, and then also data derived from the Ghana Statistical Service. So these two form the ways of which and data is drawn to see whether, let's say in the case of sport, is achieving the social dimensions of the SDGs. So basically, especially with the budgetary system, which I mentioned earlier on, it kind of like measure the expenditure, that's the money given to the Ministry of Youth and Sports, whether it's used to achieve, the SDG related objectives. And then based on that, they use that to see whether the ministry is actually performing in accordance to that particular Hyperion software that I mentioned. So for us, we focus on qualitative data, which were driven from government policy documents, government officials, and then key actors from non-state sports organizations. So basically, we focus at the regional and the district level to see how the lived experiences, of these actors informs us that the sports ministry's intended outcomes are being achieved or implemented. To do this, we use a theory called Maitland's ambiguity conflict model, right, which is a theoretical framework used to analyze policy here and then implementation link. So basically, it helps us to know whether the policies are ambiguous or not, and also whether they are conflict with regards to resources used for implementations. Well, in a nutshell, there have been some concerted efforts by the sports ministry, but we identified some challenges that affect their intentions. And like I mentioned, the medium-term expenditure framework of the sports ministry, which shows the government effort to use to achieve the social dimension of the SDG through sports um, do not really tell us what is on the ground, do not tell us the lived experiences of the organizations on the ground and implementing these policies. So we identified some challenges, I think about 5 challenges of the policy implementation associated with one, resource distributions. And here, those that were interviewed feel so that the resources are not evenly distributed. And this takes us to the second one, which is the too much emphasis on football. It shows that there is too much financial resource going to football, and for that reason, affects the resource distribution, that is the distribution of money to other organizations at the regional and the district level. There's also the non-involvement of local implementing actors. Here, government has a good policy to use sports to achieve the social objectives, but our finding shows that those at the regional and the district level do not really know much about an implementation strategy to achieve these objectives. And then the last one is the legitimation of sport for development organizations. There are some organizations that are not necessarily state-based, like the National Sports Associations, and then NGOs that use sports as a means to achieve developmental outcomes. They feel they are not involved at all. And sometimes, a little legitimation of their operations allows them to, go out to the communities and then, support government in its intention to achieve healthy population and well-being of the people of Ghana. So this actually sums up the publication that we made, and we discussed the impact of these challenges for sustainability into details. So basically, this is an overview. I want you to stay tuned. I'll be breaking down the entire research process, how we started and how we ended, so that and you have, let's say, a practical view of how sport is used in achieving social development in Ghana, particularly what the policy says to do and what is actually is being done at the grassroots or in the districts. Thank you so much for your audience, and I hope you stay tuned for more in the subsequent ones. Bye.